That old man finally kicked the bucket, huh? A man with no class burst into laughter, spitting as he spoke. It was my brother, someone so detestable I couldn't stand to even look at his face. He hadn't shown up for the wake or the funeral, and now he comes back home as if he's finally ready to pay respects to our father, only to spew such vile words. How can you say something like that? I snapped back, lowering my voice in anger at his tasteless remark. But it seemed to have no effect on my brother, who just kept on with his vulgar laughter. A stubborn old man who never listened to a thing I said. I'm relieved he's gone. Finally, this house will be mine. In this day and age, just having a house means you're winning. It appeared my brother had returned not to greet our father, but solely with the house in his sights. While my father struggled against illness, my brother offered no help, only coming around to ask for money. Having a wife and children to support, a rent-free house must seem like a treasure to him. That's why I couldn't help but laugh. To think that someone who caused so much trouble and didn't even show up for the funeral believes they can inherit this house. My sneer seemed to register with my brother, as he frowned in displeasure. Huh? Of course, I'm entitled. Did he write a will or something? My brother's gaze fell on the envelope in my hand. Seeing the envelope I was holding, my brother seemed to think it was a will. Too bad for you. Even if you made a will leaving me nothing, the law dictates how much a child can inherit from a parent. If I'm dissatisfied with what's written there, I'll sue right away. Suddenly, my brother's vile smirk returned. And he waved me off as if shooing away an insect. Now that you know, get lost. This house is mine now. At that moment, I couldn't hold back any longer and burst into laughter. My brother looked at me, puzzled, as I wiped away the tears forming at the corners of my eyes. Well, it really turned out just like Dad said it would. I am Luna. 3 years ago, I married my slightly older husband, and we've been living a dual-income life ever since. It's been 10 years since my mother passed away, and my father, who had been living alone in our spacious family home, recently began to weaken in his legs. I do have an older brother. However, the thought of relying on him to take care of our father never crossed my mind. My brother, who is 6 years older, seemed like a diligent soccer kid until about elementary school, but his behavior worsened during his rebellious phase, likely due to the bad influence of his friends. He wouldn't listen to our mild-mannered mother or even our strict father, staying out late and hanging out with bad influences. At that time, I was in the early grades of elementary school and didn't have fond memories of my brother, who rarely came home and was cold to me when he did. One would think such behavior would settle down after a few years, but bad associations seem hard to break. Around the time my brother started college, he caused significant trouble with a woman, and my father had to apologize to the woman's family. Though I wasn't told the details, given his rough manner of speaking to me, I could guess. From my perspective, being his sister meant I could fully retaliate, but things change when romance is involved. Even as a child, I was worried about the woman involved and utterly despised my brother for being able to do such things to a woman without any remorse. My brother showed no sign of repentance. Instead of apologizing to our father, who had just returned from making apologies on his behalf, he yelled, "What the hell are you doing? You never listen to me and just decide I'm the bad guy." Despite my mother's attempt to smooth things over, my father, infuriated, said, "How can you say such things after hurting a woman? You are no longer a child of this house, nor can I even consider you human. Don't ever show your face here again." My brother left saying, "Fine by me," but about a month later, there was a voicemail message left on our home's landline. It seemed that right after my brother left, my father had stopped sending him money for school fees and living expenses. My mother wanted to call him back after hearing the worried message, but my father was furiously against it, so I chose to ignore it too. After that, the frequent calls stopped within a week, and we lost track of my brother's whereabouts. Then, not long after, my mother's illness was discovered. Despite her frail health and efforts in treatment, she passed away. My mother mentioned my brother until her last moments, so I secretly searched for him without my father knowing. But without mutual friends, I couldn't find a way to contact him, and I couldn't fulfill my mother's last wish. Then, suddenly, my brother returned home, catching me by surprise, but I took the opportunity to tell him about our mother. Is that so? After a moment of silence upon hearing of our mother's passing, he then said, "Hey, tell Dad to lend me some money. Since I had to drop out of college because of you, he should take responsibility." He didn't even try to pay respects to our mother. Instead, he tried to squeeze money out of our father, who was weakened by grief. I was so furious at his insensitivity that I yelled at him to leave right then. My brother talked only about his hardships, completely oblivious to why our father had disowned him. I thought that someone like him, even if he was my brother, should not be allowed near our beloved father. However, my brother would unexpectedly show up at our home every few months, attempting to see our father. I was okay as long as I was home, but I started to worry once I began working. As my father's mobility declined over the years, there were times he would be home alone because he could only go out when he was feeling well enough. So, I repeatedly emphasized to him the importance of always checking the intercom and keeping the door locked to avoid any contact with my brother. "I can handle him with one hand," he would say, laughing it off. But given their difference in age and my brother's youth, it wasn't hard to imagine my father getting hurt if my brother did anything rash. Fortunately, as time went on, my brother's visits became less frequent, and by the time I got married and started living with my husband and father, we didn't have to worry much about him anymore. Still, considering the what-ifs, my husband and I had serious discussions about prioritizing my father's care. If I can no longer move freely, I'll go into a facility. My father often said, perhaps out of consideration for my husband and me. Despite this, I chose to take care of him at our family home. I tried to use day services effectively so as not to burden my husband too much while I was at work. However, since losing my mother, my father seemed to be in a state of decline, showing little interest in anything and mostly staying indoors all day. Even when I invited him to engage in his hobbies like fishing or playing chess, he gently refused, preferring the solitude of our home. As his health declined, my father passed away 3 years after we began living together. With no time to grieve, I was swept into arranging the funeral and dealing with the estate. Every item of his I disposed of felt like erasing a part of his existence, causing me to hesitate multiple times. However, I knew I couldn't leave things as they were forever, so I eventually sorted through his belongings. After working day and night for a while, I decided to take a day off and rest at home. Due to continuous sleep deprivation, I thought I'd relax and just lie down when suddenly, the sound of a large truck stopping nearby startled me. Considering the narrow alleys around here, I wondered if everything was all right. But then I heard a clicking noise from the front door and jumped out of bed in shock. Could someone have entered by mistake? Or is it a burglar? In broad daylight with people around? Normally, my husband always locks the door when he leaves, so it shouldn't be possible for the door to open. My heart raced as I approached the front door, where I saw 3 silhouettes through the frosted glass. In an instant, the sliding door was flung open, and I found myself face to face with familiar and unfamiliar people. Good, the lock's not broken. Oh, you're still here? Well, that's convenient. It'd be a hassle to break in when no one's around and get accused of unlawful entry. My brother muttered incoherently. Beside him stood a woman and a small child, roughly his age. Presumably my brother's wife and son, though we had never met. They looked at me suspiciously without a hint of a smile. I've got movers waiting outside, so I'll do the introduction of my family later. Hey, you should help with the moving too. It'll be a good chance for you to bond with my wife and nephew, and it'll help us move in quicker, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Moving in? I was stunned by my brother's words. It seemed the large truck I heard earlier belonged to movers carrying my brother's belongings. My brother's unsettling smirk widened as he began to speak with an air of triumph. I saw Dad's name in the newspaper. Oh, so the old man finally died, huh? We had a good laugh about it at home. He was a terrible father, but I am the eldest son, after all, so it would be pitiful not to take over the house. I've planned to live here from today on. You shouldn't linger around here forever either. Get out as soon as you can. While I stood there dumbfounded, my brother's wife quickly entered and started unloading their belongings. The child, excited by the spacious and large house, kicked off their shoes and ran around. "Hold on, I haven't heard anything about this, and I can't just hand it over all of a sudden," I said. At that, my brother burst into laughter. "Handover? Dad's dead, so the house is mine now. Or did you think caring for him so dutifully meant you'd inherit? I saw through that long ago, a total waste of effort. You might think I'm swooping in to take everything, but traditionally, the eldest son inherits. Got it? If you've got time to argue, better start packing and leave." Even after keeping my distance from my father to protect him, my brother, perhaps holding a grudge, lashed out at me as if venting his frustration. Furious at my brother for continuing to insult our father even after his death, I reached my breaking point and took a deep breath, ready to snap back. However, hearing the sound of something breaking behind me, I quickly turned and ran towards the noise. Looking, I encountered the sight of my brother's son standing frozen by the shelf where my father's altar was placed, and at his feet lay the picture frame containing my father's portrait, face down. "What are you doing?" I exclaimed. The child flinched and tried to flee, so I said sternly, "Don't step on the glass, you'll hurt yourself." Hearing this, my sister-in-law rushed over and glared at me, saying, "What's wrong with you, yelling at a child like that? Are you crazy?" Feeling an urgent need to restore my father's photo to its rightful place, I regained a bit of my composure there and then and began to clean up the fragments of the broken picture frame immediately. Meanwhile, my brother's wife, holding their crying child, continued to hurl insults at me. "Living at your parents' house despite being married must have been quite the comfortable life for you. Thanks to your interference, we didn't receive a dime of support from Dad. Planning to take over the house after just a few years of cohabitation and caregiving is utterly ridiculous." Brother's wife glared at me, her words spitting out like a machine gun. "You hardly cared for him, did you? Just put Dad in a facility and relaxed with your husband. I've heard Dad had a decent savings, and you nearly had him pay for everything. Pretty bold for a little sister. Normally, one respects their elder brother, right? We have a son who's growing up, and have been married for over 3 years, so as the eldest son's wife, my position is higher. You all should just leave. I might even forgive you for shouting at my son if you just disappear quickly." Despite the child breaking a precious photo, there was no apology, just the sight of her consoling a bawling child made me sigh. I quickly realized the child wasn't hurt, but I was at a loss for what to do next. If I didn't stop my brother and his family from continually moving their stuff into the house, it would lead to trouble later. "Can we talk for a second?" "Oh. You've been ignoring people for so long, and now you want me to listen to you? I didn't think you were that selfish. My father and mother must be crying in heaven. Well, I won't be a chief mourner, but I'll at least be at the funeral, and I'll listen to you then. Anyway, I'm busy right now, so you better get your stuff together." Older brother said without even glancing at me, scanning the house, likely valuing anything of worth. He seemed to be appraising the place for anything valuable. But such things were long gone. Thinking about it made me accidentally smirk. My brother didn't miss that. "What's so funny? Mocking me?" "Yeah, because it's just so silly. It's exactly as Dad said it would be." I could feel the atmosphere freeze at that moment. But I didn't flinch. "I had been planning to give this to you the next time you came asking for money, since you never listen. Take a good look at it." I handed him a brown envelope, which he snatched with a puzzled look. "Writing me out of the will won't work. The law decides how much I can inherit. I'll sue immediately." He seemed triumphant as he unfolded what he thought was the will from the envelope. Indeed, it was a copy of Dad's will. Dad had prepared it secretly about 2 months before his passing, sensing his time was near. He was a considerate man, ensuring his estate was properly distributed among us siblings. Certainly, the breakdown between my brother and me is almost identical. I have a bit more simply because I've been caring for him longer, but that doesn't mean my brother's share is significantly less. In fact, if we don't splurge, the amount we have is enough to live comfortably for the time being. However, judging by my sister-in-law's appearance today, dressed in designer skirts, boots, necklaces, and bags, she seems to be living far from thriftily. Moreover, her outfit didn't seem at all like something you'd wear on moving day. From this, I could tell that my sister-in-law lacks common sense in society's eyes. Huh? What do you mean? After reading the will, my brother tore the paper into pieces and threw them on the floor. To be exact, he tore up a copy of the will, along with copies of documents related to ceramics and a handwritten letter from our father. The house has already been sold. That's unbelievable. We had been informed by our father himself about what would happen to the house before he passed away. Knowing him, he'd come to take over the house as soon as I die. Anticipating this, I've been making arrangements to pass it on to John. He just turned 20 this year and is looking to start a business, a young man with a future. I owed him a lot, and I wanted to help him out. I have plans for you since I can't leave the house to you. Just be happy with your spouse. John is one of our cousins. Our father's siblings were all close, and I used to see John quite often. He's a reliable and kind-hearted young man, much like our uncle. I was at ease with him inheriting the property and happily accepted my father's words. My spouse and I were allowed to stay until John moved in, and I was gradually packing our belongings. My brother, completely unaware of this, turned red with anger and yelled, "Who would be happy to buy such an old house?" Saying a buyer has been found, it must be some relative's doing. Who's taking over this house? Tell me now, and I'll settle it. The letter from our father only mentioned the sale of the house. It was a good thing I blacked out the personal information on the registration documents just in case. However, before I could say anything, my sister-in-law next to him snapped, "Hey, we've even packed our stuff, what now? Why didn't you check beforehand? You really are foolish." This seemed to hurt my brother's pride, and he turned even redder, saying, "You know who's taking over this house, right? Contact them and either get this house back or give us your new place." Why would it come to that? Sure, we're moving, so we'll live in the new place, but it only has our living space. I replied calmly, but my brother was too panicked to listen. Such important matters are usually discussed with the whole family. You're not really okay with this, are you? Leaving the house to someone other than us on your own. His nonsense made me snap. Huh? Don't lump me in with you. I heard about this directly from Dad and agreed. You've been disowned for a long time and haven't even come to apologize, so you have no right to say anything now. My brother bit his lip and barked even more. Then give me half the money. We're the only heirs. I have the right to inherit too. That amount includes your inheritance. The selling price was partly used for Dad's treatment and some for the funeral. After settling all the expenses, what was left was divided in half. It can't just be this little. I sighed as my brother, red in the face and dripping with sweat, flew into a rage. You yourself said it's such an old house. It didn't sell for much, and funerals aren't free, so this is what you get. My brother fell silent at my words. However, contrary to that, my sister-in-law yelled again. This isn't what I was told. You said you were the eldest son of a wealthy family, which is why I decided to marry you. You tricked me. Unbelievably, it seemed my brother had been pretending to be more than he was to impress his wife. The fact that she decided to marry him because he supposedly had money is one thing, but it seems my brother's tendency to exaggerate hasn't changed since the old days. To avoid escalating into a marital spat right there, which would only be a hassle, I tried to reason with him, albeit internally exasperated. But, you're not left with nothing from Dad's inheritance. Just save that up and work steadily. Eventually, you'll be able to build your own home. My brother remained silent, with a bitter look on his face, while my sister-in-law frowned and played with her smartphone. So, we don't have a home to go back to now? I couldn't miss the mutter from my nephew. What do you mean no home? The moment that came up, my brother seemed about to lash out at the child, so I instinctively protected him. Don't lay a hand on the kid. What do you mean by no home? When I asked my brother again, an unexpected answer came back. I got fired. Because of that, it's become difficult to even pay the rent, so that's why we came here. He embezzled money from the company. How lame to get caught. But he said not to worry since we were gonna get a hefty inheritance from Dad, so I followed him. And now look at this mess, I'm the victim here. It all comes down to your reckless spending. Don't you have any intention of reflecting on that? Why is it my fault? You're the brainless one who can't earn enough to decently support your wife and kid. Both my brother and his wife started arguing, forgetting about their child. I wondered if the kid always lived in such an environment. It made sense why he wasn't well behaved. Ultimately, realizing my brother's deceitfulness hasn't changed since the old days, I tried to kick them out. Then, my sister-in-law clung to me. Look, this is our situation. We don't even have a home now. Regardless of me, don't you feel sorry for this kid? We were completely deceived by your brother. I'm not asking to live in the new house, just share a bit of the inheritance with me. I want to buy this kid some clothes for his upcoming birthday. My sister-in-law conveniently started crying. Indeed, the child's clothes were noticeably short. However, her words made me question. Is your son's birthday coming up soon? Yes, he's turning 4 next month. My brother and his wife got married a little over 3 years ago. This was something she had said herself, so there's no mistake. If they have a son turning 4 next month, it means they had a shotgun wedding. Did you marry my brother right after meeting him? What? Yeah, but what's that to you? Listening to her, I almost concluded. If her story was true, then she was already pregnant before meeting my brother. As I looked up to ask more, noticing her own slip-up, my sister-in-law's face had turned pale. Why would you ask that all of a sudden? It's definitely our child, don't say weird things. Seeing her obviously flustered, my brother reacted. Why do you look like that? You got something to hide? To me, the more unbelievable thing was my brother not noticing his wife, who must have been visibly pregnant at the time. He's always been someone not interested in anything besides himself. Maybe it wasn't too far-fetched he didn't notice. However, as my sister-in-law remained silent, becoming visibly more anxious, my brother started to berate her. Then, she blurted out, because you lied. This child is from a man I used to see at a club, but I thought you earned more, so I chose you. I took the almost crying child to another room. From there, I called the police, requesting their capture and temporary protection for the child. Within minutes, the police arrived, and my brother and his wife, causing a nuisance in the neighborhood with their quarrel, were taken away. A child welfare officer accompanied the child for protection, ensuring proper measures would be taken. Some time after, I heard that my brother and his wife had finalized their divorce. Following her confession that she had lied about the child being my brother's, he filed for alimony against her and her affair partner, but it turned out both were almost broke. My sister-in-law had to sell all her purchased brand items, but that hardly made life easy, and she ended up leaving her son with her parents to work from dawn till dusk. It looks like it's going to take a while before my brother receives the alimony, and still jobless, he shamelessly showed up at our family home again. I'm broke, so can you help me out a bit? The mental stress from my ex-wife is so bad, I can't even work. Every time my brother tried to pin all the blame on his ex-wife alone, my husband, who was quite imposing, would turn him away at the door. My husband, unlike my scrawny brother, was a former rugby team captain and quite imposing in both face and physique. Facing such an intimidating man, my brother had no choice but to leave, and we had no contact with him for a while. However, when my cousin John was there to take over the family home, my brother showed up, accusing John of stealing my house and lunged at him, which led my husband to immediately hand him over to the police. Fortunately, John wasn't seriously injured. As for my brother, he had been sentenced to several years in prison. John thanked us and saying that he can start a new life without having to be afraid of him. My spouse and I agreed to save all of my father's inheritance and continue living without excess. The new house we built is not big enough to show off to others, but we are sure that we will be able to spend even more enjoyable days in the future because we have made it into a house that we are both satisfied with, filled with all our specialties.